Chapter 261, New Capabilities. Noah still couldn't afford to be careless where Gwen's condition was concerned. The diagnostic instruments had shown nothing abnormal, but those scanners could have blind spots when it came to magical phenomena. To be safe, he had decided to personally scan her with his own magic. Gwen pushed herself up out of the examination pod and peered at Noah and Lysandra. "Already done?" she asked, tilting her head. "No, not yet. Come over here," Noah said, nodding toward the pod. Gwen braced her hands on the pod's rim, stood, and stepped out. As she walked, the nanosuit on her skin began to dissipate, starting at her fingertips and soles and contracting inward toward her chest. It condensed into a small metal sphere that flew back into Lysandra's outstretched hand. Gwen's clothing reverted to pajamas. She came to Noah and blinked at him. He held out his palm, turned up. Gwen placed her delicate hand in his. Feeling the warmth of her skin, Noah dispelled the distractions in his head and took her hand gently. Magic flowed through him, then surged into Gwen through their contact. Vast streams of arcane energy condensed and flowed into her, but Gwen felt no pain, only a comforting warmth. Noah closed his eyes and tuned into her body. He let his magic circulate through her, searching for anything abnormal or for any residual divine power from Asgard. His mind sifted through the currents of energy moving through her. After a moment, he opened his eyes. "Okay, Gwen, there's nothing wrong with your body," he said. "Heh, I knew it. I didn't feel odd after I got back yesterday." "Noah, you're worrying too much," Gwen replied with a smile. "No, I mean nothing harmful," Noah said. He squeezed her hand and lifted it in front of her. "But feel your power. See if anything else is different." Gwen cocked her head, concentrating inward. A low hum of energy, then a flash. "Ah!" A crackle of electricity jumped across the back of her hand. She stared at the spot where light had flashed. "Is this lightning?" "Yes," Noah said, smiling. He released her hand so she could move on her own. "Feel your new power." Earlier, while scanning her, Noah had been specifically checking for any trace of Mjolnir's divine energy. When Gwen had lifted the hammer the previous night, her clothes had not transformed into Thor's armor. The hammer's divine power had been refused entry into her body, so no new armor condensed. That meant there should be no lingering Asgardian power inside her. What Noah found, however, was something else entirely, an electrical energy flowing with a lightning attribute. It wasn't the lightning of Mjolnir. It seemed to be a new power, an attribute of lightning woven into the magic already inside Gwen. Noah suspected what had happened. The divine energy had washed over her rather than entering, and the magic within her body had absorbed the lightning aspect of that energy. To help form and stabilize it, Noah channeled a thread of his own electrocution blade's lightning power into her briefly, modeling the attribute so Gwen's internal magic could simulate and shape it. The lightning she produced looked and behaved exactly like his electrocution blade, but its origin was different. Why Gwen had this ability, whether it was connected to the fact she had once been a doll, Noah didn't know. But now that he knew she could take on elemental attributes, he started making plans. His own powers covered many different elements. He could have Gwen attempt other attributes in the future and see if she could adapt. Each successful addition would make her far stronger. Gwen's initial bewilderment quickly turned to glee. She began to unleash small bolts from her hands, laughing as she experimented. "Wow, this is fun!" Noah looked up at Lysandra. She was in a white lab coat for research, looser than some of her usual outfits, but the coat emphasized her professional air. Her golden curls were pulled into a high ponytail, revealing the line of her neck, and a pair of black-framed glasses made her features look even more thoughtful and composed. Lysandra watched Gwen with interest. "An interesting body," she observed. "Gwen's power may continue to grow." Noah nodded. "I plan to let her try other types of power. If she can take on more attributes, it could be a huge boost to her combat abilities." He glanced at Lysandra again. He rarely saw her dressed like this, so clearly in a research role, and the sight lingered in his mind. Lysandra noticed the look, and the corner of her mouth curved into a faint smile. Most of what gave her that composed air came not from instinct, but from what she'd learned lately. Lysandra had originally been a super AI and had only recently developed fully human-like emotions. She'd been somewhat inexperienced with social subtlety, but at the banquet the previous evening, she had picked up a great deal from conversations with other women, especially Pepper and Natasha. One was seasoned in field experience, the other in caring for a partner. Both had piled on practical advice. Jane, with a boyfriend of her own, was a bit more naive and offered less useful guidance. Noah pulled his attention back to the task at hand. He had a lot to try and a lot of testing ahead. With Gwen practicing her new lightning and Lysandra already thinking ahead, the day's work was about to begin. Chapter 262, Morningstar's Refit Plan. Inside the laboratory, Noah and Lysandra stood before the experimental platform, going over research plans. Gwen had been sent to the cultivation room after she accidentally discharged a bolt of lightning while experimenting with her new abilities and knocked over a row of potions on the adjacent bench. Noah, meanwhile, had already shifted most of his attention to the Morningstar. Since acquiring the Morningstar, Noah had bumped many of his other projects down the priority list. The ship and the universe it offered were intoxicating. Strange planets, alien life, limitless space. But he knew he wouldn't get far into the cosmos until he finished refitting the Morningstar and resolved a few pressing matters on Earth. His mental checklist covered the ship's battleship shell, energy system, weapons, engines, and a host of internal modifications. For the outer hull, Noah planned a strong new alloy, vibranium fused with other metals in an optimal ratio. Full vibranium armor for a ship of that size would be prohibitively expensive and, he judged, unnecessary. A vibranium-based alloy would still grant excellent defensive properties. He thought of Dr. Myron McLean's World War II experiments, the proto-adamantium that had been fused with vibranium to create Captain America's shield, combining extreme hardness with vibranium's kinetic absorption. McLean could never reproduce that exact process. Later adamantium synthesis omitted vibranium and thus lost the absorption trait. Noah didn't have either of those synthesis methods, so he'd use a practical vibranium metal fusion that gave strong protection even if it fell short of proto-adamantium's legend. The energy system would be equally important. For now, the ship's power tapped directly into the Tesseract. With its near-infinite energy, the Morningstar's reserves filled quickly. Noah intended to upgrade the energy core and the ship's shielding. The upgraded shield should make breaching the armor extremely difficult, so he didn't feel an urgent need to invent an unbeatable hull material right away. The weapon systems would get a major overhaul. The Morningstar hadn't been designed as a frontline battleship, so Noah planned to retrofit it, linking weapon upgrades to the energy improvements. He wanted a heavy cannon capable, at a minimum, of sinking a city. Given that he already wielded Infinity Stones, he trusted his own ingenuity to achieve that. This was a modest target next to his ultimate aim, a planet-busting cannon. He'd already sketched the engine plan, a light speed or warp drive system. In a little while, he intended to strike at Hydra and use the opportunity to access Eschild's archives. A Kree scientist had once left data on a light-speed engine, and with the Tesseract's power, Noah could build a truly potent drive. There were also practical, domestic changes to make. The Morningstar's interiors had been arranged for Yasuo and his crew. Now that the ship had a new master, the living quarters needed to reflect Noah's needs. Cargo holds could be converted into extra laboratories. The entertainment room could stay. Everything would be handled systematically, a comprehensive plan first, then steady execution. Noah intended to house the refit facility beneath his manor. For a ship the Morningstar's size, the workshop would have to be massive, at least 300 meters long and 100 meters high. That scale might be daunting for ordinary construction, but Noah had an army of nanorobots and blitzcrank units. Excavation would be effortless. He tapped the plan into the computer. "Have them start this afternoon," he said to Lysandra. A streak of code glimmered in Lysandra's eyes as she transmitted the command. The blitzcrank robot crew nearby received it and abandoned their current tasks to prepare materials for the underground workshop. Also, Noah added after a beat, remembering 2 more items. He reached out and the Tesseract and the Mind Stone, blue and yellow, appeared in his hands. They were next on the experimental list. He considered both stones carefully. The Mind Stone would stay in the lab for long-term research. Its mental powers required study and containment. The Tesseract, by contrast, was far more useful in day-to-day work. He had been using its spatial energy regularly, and it was too convenient to lock away. So he decided to keep the Tesseract with him and to secure the Mind Stone in the lab. "Lysandra, make a vibranium cabinet for the Mind Stone," he said. Lysandra raised her hand to the indicated spot, and a display case of shimmering vibranium rose from the floor, sealing the Mind Stone inside. Later, Noah planned to use the Space Stone to stabilize the spatial region around the laboratory and manor, so teleportation or similar intrusions would be impossible. No one could sneak in and take the Mind Stone. Noah turned back to the Tesseract, weighing the next question in his mind. Should he break its outer shell? Chapter 263, Crushing the Cosmic Cube. Noah set the Mind Stone down on the vibranium counter and turned his attention to the Tesseract in his other hand. Everyone knew the Tesseract was only an outer shell. You had to break it open to reach the Space Stone inside. That blue casing was more than decoration. Like Thanos' gauntlet, it functioned as a conduit for channeling Infinity Stone power. Unlike the gauntlet, though, the Tesseract dampened the Space Stone's raw force. It never allowed the stone to reach its full destructive potential, but it also stopped the wielder from being incinerated on contact. In short, it made the Space Stone usable and safe for ordinary hands. Why Fury could hold it, for example. Should he smash the casing now? Noah rolled the Tesseract between his fingers, feeling its cool surface. In the film, after wiping out the Asgardian ship, Thanos crushed the Tesseract and pulled the Space Stone out because he was strong enough to handle it without the shell. Noah was no different in that regard. He could physically touch the Infinity Stones. After a brief thought, he decided to do the same. Break it. The Tesseract's shell was astonishingly tough. Even with the hero template and the resolve rune strengthening his body, he wasn't sure he could crush it barehanded. He wasn't certain whether Thanos had used the Power Stone to help when he shattered it. Still, Noah placed the Tesseract in his right hand, gathered his strength, and squeezed with everything he had. The cube's light flared, but it held. He relaxed his hand and inspected it. Not a crack. Most of the hero templates he'd summoned so far were ordinary mortals whose effectiveness depended on skills and gear, so the templates hadn't done much for his raw physical strength. The only real frontline type he'd pulled was Set, a half-beast, not weak, but far from a titan. Noah smiled ruefully. He'd been testing his limits. This was one more experiment. He leaned on the one thing that did make a dramatic difference, the resolve rune. As he calmed his mind, the rune inside him stirred. Power began to flow through his veins, amplifying both body and magic. Noah felt energy gather, the air around him heating with barely contained force. His eyes glowed as the rune's power solidified into visible magic. Gripping the Tesseract again, Noah squeezed until a grinding, strained sound filled the room. Under that force, the casing finally gave. The Tesseract shattered, shards flying outward and dissolving into streams of energy that quickly dispersed into the air. When he opened his hand, only blue residue clung there for a moment before it too vaporized, leaving a single gem that pulsed with cold blue light. The true Space Stone. The moment his fingers touched it, the stone's immense power surged toward him. Every Infinity Stone carried the same danger. A weak wielder would be overwhelmed and literally explode from the influx. The Tesseract had masked much of the Space Stone's intensity. Now, stripped bare, the gem's output was unmistakably stronger than before. Noah examined the blue gem, feeling the tide of spatial power course through him. The boost to his space-based abilities was immediate. Teleportation, arcane shift, void walk, and his portal spells all sharpened. Most notable was how the Space Stone's blue essence blended with the golden flash power already resonating in him. The two merged into a richer purplish-gold spatial energy that felt far more potent than either alone. This change would alter how he used teleport. He pictured all the places he'd ever visited. Each one left a trace of him. With this depth of spatial awareness, he wouldn't always need to place wards or markers at a destination beforehand. He could follow his own lingering traces to jump there, regardless of distance. Teleporting to places he'd never been would still be possible, but less safe. Without prior knowledge of the destination, unknown hazards remained a risk. Noah closed his fist around the space stone, savoring the power and centering himself. He needed to learn these stones properly and integrate their abilities into his own system, much like he'd made the resolve rune part of him. With the mind stone resting on the counter and the space stone now in his hand, he felt the first clear step toward mastering forces most mortals couldn't touch. Chapter 264, about the Predator ship. At the edge of a certain galaxy, Yondu's Raider's mothership sat in dock. Yondu, arms crossed, flashed his jagged teeth at the holographic client projected in front of him. No problem, as long as you pay enough when the time comes. He wore a brown leather jacket. Above the collar, his blue skin showed. The most noticeable feature was the red device on his head that looked like a mohawk. From a distance, it could be mistaken for hair, but it was actually the control for his mechanical fin, the thing that let him command his deadly Yaka arrow. After the client outlined the job, Yondu shut off the projection, and the conversation ended. A grin spread across his face. He started humming one of the songs he'd heard on Star-Lord's music player and walked off with a spring in his step. The deal had to be lucrative. Yondu wouldn't be this pleased otherwise. Hidden nearby, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, watched. He'd come to tell Yondu something, but overhearing the mission changed everything. Kidnapped from Earth by Yondu years ago, Peter had never really felt like he belonged with the Raiders. Lately, that feeling had been growing into something he could no longer ignore, but he'd been afraid Yondu wouldn't let him leave. Now that Yondu had accepted a big contract, Peter saw an opportunity. When Yondu left, Peter slipped up to the communicator Yondu had used. He checked over his shoulder, selected the recent transmission, and played it back. The job was for an item called the Cosmic Orb, and then Peter heard the figure that made his jaw drop. 4 billion? He muttered, staring at the recording. The amount was ridiculous. Visions of a life drenched in credits flashed through his head. Shaking himself, he forced his focus back on the task at hand. The client in the projection had been an older man with white hair and heavy eyeliner. Whether fashion or race, Peter couldn't tell. Peter saved that face. If he was going to run with the orb, he wanted to know potential buyers. He scrolled through the data the client had sent to Yondu, a list of possible locations. Planet Praxis 9, Morag. He pulled up each world's status. Praxis 9 was crawling with the 8 Galaxy Empire's archaeological teams. Too hot. Morag, however, was promising. The ocean's level had been dropping for the last few centuries, and recent scans marked it status safe. That was more Peter's speed. He copied everything onto a small data stick, then paused. If he was going to bolt, he couldn't leave a trace of where he'd looked. He reopened the ship's computer and wiped the files clean, gone and unrecoverable. As a final flourish, he left a unicorn doodle in the corner of the screen. Done, he said to himself, grinning. Let's see how you lot find me now. Peter slapped on his headphones and wandered toward the craft bay, greeting people he liked along the way in his usual easy manner. Hey, Kraglin. Star-Lord, you okay? Kraglin asked. Yeah, nothing. Bye. Peter kept his voice light and casual. He climbed into his personal ship, the Milano, took a deep breath, then pushed off. The mothership receded as he punched to the jump point and vanished into hyperspace. Back in the mission room, Yondu returned to check the data with the same eager grin Peter had seen. The screen was blank. His smile froze. Then he noticed the unicorn doodle. Peter! Yondu roared. He stormed to the bridge and barked orders for a tracer on Star-Lord's ship. Find him. Now. Boss, we can't lock on to the Milano. He must have had this planned, a subordinate reported. Yondu's eye twitched. He kept telling himself it was lucky the crew didn't know the job Peter had just sabotaged. Otherwise, he'd have been swamped with questions. But there was no mistaking his fury. That kid's gonna pay for this, he snarled. Find that ship. Chapter 265, New York is back in action. 3 days after the Battle of New York, the city had already shrugged itself back into motion. With help from government agencies, neighboring cities, and a flood of volunteer efforts, streets reopened and traffic returned. New York felt even livelier than before. The wreckage had drawn a crowd. People came to gawk. They wanted to see the monstrous aliens the news had described and to catch a glimpse of the handsome superheroes who'd saved the city. In reality, there was nothing left to see. Government crews had scrubbed the streets clean. Not a trace of the invaders remained. The heroes were nowhere to be seen. Only Stark Tower stood out, fenced off and under hurried renovation. That didn't stop the curiosity or the opportunism. Influencers and celebrities descended on the site to boost their profiles, calling themselves fans of every hero under the sun. Overnight, a flood of superhero merchandise appeared online, some of it outright rip-offs. Sales exploded. On the top floor of Stark Tower, which Tony had rushed to stabilize after multiple rounds of damage, he was on the phone with his legal team. Emergency construction had minimized structural danger. Otherwise, the building would still be a condemned hazard. The lawyers were calling to report that several businesses were profiting off Iron Man's image without permission. Tony listened, half amused. This kind of thing had started almost as soon as he became Iron Man. His legal team had a long list of offenders they'd chased into oblivion. But after the recent publicity, copycats were back in force. "Okay, I get it. Take care of it," Tony said. "Give them a lesson in intellectual property." He paused, thinking. "Oh, and check into anything using my friend's images. I'll ask them, but don't wait on me." Tony realized other heroes' likenesses were being misused too. Still, he figured some of them could handle it themselves. Noah might not have a top-tier legal staff, but he had a powerful AI. Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Captain America were backed by top US agencies and could deal with unscrupulous sellers. Thor and Loki, being gods from another world, probably didn't even know what copyright was, let alone care. He passed the orders along anyway. Why let others profit off their faces? "Tony, what's wrong?" Pepper asked, appearing in the doorway in casual clothes and barefoot, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. She handed one to him and settled beside his desk. "Thanks," Tony said, taking a sip. "Just the usual, people trying to make a buck off my helmet." Pepper smiled. She'd handled these headaches for years, though since Tony had handed over day-to-day operations of Stark Industries to her, most of it had fallen to the legal team. "Haven't they learned?" She laughed. "This stuff pops up every time something big happens." She studied him for a beat. "Why don't we corner the market?" she suggested. "Instead of chasing knockoffs, we produce the official merchandise ourselves, license it properly, and sell real, quality stuff. We can shut down the riffraff and raise money at the same time." Tony considered it. "Sounds like trouble. You're swamped, and we're hardly hurting for cash." "It's not a huge lift," Pepper said, "and all the proceeds can go to the Maria Foundation, your foundation. After the battle, the foundation's been supporting a lot of displaced people. The demand is massive. If we don't do it, someone else will. We make it official, we control it, and we help the people who actually need it." Tony thought about the families who'd lost homes and loved ones in the attack. His mother's namesake foundation had been funding relief and rehabilitation since he set it up. The idea of letting street vendors and fly-by-night brands reap those profits didn't sit right. "Triple win," he said finally. He put his glass down and reached over to ruffle Pepper's hair. "Pepper, you are ridiculously clever. Okay, take it. Set up a licensed merchandise program. Coordinate with the legal team and the foundation, and see if the others want in. We can offer them licensing deals, split revenue, whatever it takes." "Do you think they'll go for it?" Pepper asked. "Most will," Tony said. "Noah will handle his own tech stuff if he wants. The government-backed ones can sign off. Thor and Loki probably won't care, but we'll offer them the option. If anyone says no, fine. We'll keep the Iron Man line official and funnel the profits to the foundation." He smiled. Official merch meant real quality, genuine authorization for fans, and legitimate funds to help victims. It was business, PR, and charity rolled into one. "Good," Pepper said. "I'll get the teams on it." Tony grinned, already picturing glossy displays, registered trademarks, and a whole lot more of his face on t-shirts. This time, legitimately. Chapter 266, Avengers Tower, Thor and Loki return to Asgard. Tony decided that if other people were going to profit from his image, he might as well do it himself. He also wanted his teammates, who had suddenly become famous worldwide, to share in that income, but that required their authorization. Otherwise, he'd be no better than the unscrupulous merchants who'd already been selling their faces. Among them, only Noah probably wasn't short of money. For the rest, the proceeds would be significant. From Tony's point of view, Black Widow and Hawkeye, as agents, probably weren't paid as much as the others. Captain America, an almost century-old man pulled from the ice, still depended on S-Shield for the basics, so he would likely welcome an independent source of income. The identity of Captain America had enormous public value. Merchandise featuring him would sell well. Tony had seen the chatter about it online. Black Widow and Hawkeye, by contrast, were far less popular. Thor and Loki didn't need Earth's money, but Thor's girlfriend was an Earthling, so while Thor might not care, she would. When Thor returned to Earth next, Tony planned to bring up the idea again. He even thought he might be able to talk to her directly. Noah had mentioned at the banquet that he expected Thor to go on a date with his girlfriend as soon as he arrived, and waiting for Thor to come back to Earth might mean a long wait. "Well, it's decided then, Pepper. You're going to have to run this," Tony said, gently squeezing her hand. "It's what you should do," Pepper replied with a smile. "I just hope you won't keep taking so many risks. Try to look after yourself." "Oh, some things are out of my control. Those guys the other day were invaders. We were forced to defend ourselves," Tony said, helpless. Pepper had been on edge the past few days. Whenever she replayed the TV footage, she grew anxious, and he'd been doing his best to calm her. He didn't think he had PTSD, but Pepper might be close. After a few minutes of reassurance, she stopped talking about it and let her gaze roam over the renovated top floor. "Are you really going to rename Stark Tower to Avengers Tower? It sounds a little strange," she asked. Tony had told Pepper about the idea after he got back from talking with Fury. Pepper had found it odd. "Yes, the sign on the tower was damaged, and when we repair it, we'll put up a new logo, a new beginning." Before the battle, the letters on the top had spelled Stark, his name. The fight had destroyed all but the A, which made the change convenient. He didn't plan to restore every letter. He would keep the A and make it officially Avengers Tower. "If you like it, fine," Pepper said, shrugging. She drained her wine and turned to the window. Outside the penthouse, Stark drones busied themselves across the skyline. The smoke from the New York battle had long since dispersed, but the damage was obvious. Shattered glazing, scorched facades that needed urgent replacement. Drones were swapping out the last A under Tony's design. Pedestrians and tourists below lifted their phones and filmed, posting footage to get likes and attention. Bifrost Bridge Divider. On Asgard, Thor and Loki had left the banquet early after hearing what Noah had reported. They contacted Heimdall and rode the Bifrost back home, rushing into the palace to find their mother. Odin was still in his Odin sleep and had not woken. Their only option was to speak with Frigga. "Mother, when will father wake?" Thor tried to keep the worry from his voice, but Frigga saw through it. "Thor, don't worry. Has something happened?" she asked softly. Under his mother's care, Thor's tensions eased. Loki lingered in the shadow of a pillar, arms folded, an expression unreadable. "Mother, Noah told us something important, something about Asgard's safety," Thor said. "You remember Noah, right? The Earthling who helped me?" "Of course, he's an extraordinary child," Frigga said. "Do you want to tell your father?" "Yes, I want to know when father will wake. If he can't soon, can he meet us the way he did before? You know, that way?" Thor fumbled, making vague gestures. "Astral projection?" Frigga supplied, laughing gently. Thor scratched his head, embarrassed. Loki finally spoke. "We shouldn't trust that Earthling so easily," he said. "He also took something that belongs to Asgard." "About the Tesseract, your father told me about it," Frigga replied. "If you doubt it, you can ask him when he wakes. And you've seen Noah's power. We must be careful about what he says." Thor frowned at Loki, taking the warning seriously. "All right, both of you, stop bickering," Frigga said, cutting off the rising argument. "I'll keep an eye on your father over the next few days and tell you as soon as there's news." She let Thor leave first, while she stayed behind to speak with Loki more privately. Chapter 267. Odin Awakens. Noah arrives suddenly. Thor and Loki waited almost 2 days before they finally heard back from their mother. When they arrived at the palace, Frigga was waiting for them at the gate. "Mother." The brothers exchanged a glance and approached. "Thor, Loki, you're here. Come inside. I've already spoken to your father about what you told me." Frigga gestured toward the open doors. "Mother, father, he." Thor stopped, stunned by her words. Did she mean their father was here? Not in spirit form like the last time, but but actually awake? Don't ask too many questions. Go inside. Frigga saw Thor raise his hand to speak and pressed a finger to her lips, silencing him gently. Then she motioned them forward. Thor nodded and pushed open the heavy doors, leading Loki into the great hall. They looked up and froze. On the throne at the top of the chamber sat a familiar figure. Father? Father! Their faces registered shock. The man on the throne was indeed their father, Odin, king of Asgard. Thor's eyes widened. This Odin did not look like the out-of-body soul form he had glimpsed days ago. This was truly his father, awake and present. Father, aren't you supposed to be in your Odin's leap? How? Thor and Loki approached the throne. When their mother visited 2 days ago, I woke, Odin said, his voice calm. I heard you had something urgent to discuss. He gestured for them to come closer. Odin still wore the hoary, aged look of the king, a benevolent air without the bluster of a warlord. He held Gungnir, the eternal spear, loosely in one hand. Father, a mortal on Midgard, Noah, told us that you sleep to contain your power. Is that true? Loki interrupted before Thor could speak. Thor shot him a glance but did not stop him. He wanted to hear the answer too. If true, it would confirm Noah's prophecies. You mean Noah, Odin replied. He does know many things. Yes, what he said is not entirely false. He did not deny it. Instead, he began to explain in greater detail than Noah had the history of Asgard's ancestral power. Odin's account filled in gaps, revealing that a force still lay dormant within the royal line. Everything Noah had hinted at the banquet snapped into clearer focus for Thor, including the matter of the Dark Elves. When Odin finished, Thor's expression grew grave. Father, when we were on Earth, Noah told us something important. That Asgard's old enemies, the Dark Elves, have not been completely wiped out. They're still in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike at us. The Dark Elves? Odin frowned. Thor, that cannot be. We defeated them long ago. But Father, Thor began, ready to point out how accurate Noah's other prophecies had been. No, Thor, that's impossible. Odin's voice left no room for argument. Thor felt a prickle of anxiety. How could Odin be so certain? Had he seen their annihilation with his own eyes? Before he could press the point, Odin's gaze sharpened. He stiffened on the throne and tightened his grip on Gungnir. Thor and Loki followed the king's stare. A blue light flashed in the center of the hall, and a figure appeared beneath the throne. Noah? Thor said, startled. Noah stood there calmly. How had he come? Had he overheard them? Odin's brow deepened. An uninvited arrival in Asgard was a breach of protocol and a slight to the throne. Still, Odin kept his composure and asked in a measured tone, State your purpose, Noah. Ahem. Noah bowed slightly, an acknowledgement of respect, and then looked up at the three above him. His gaze flicked over Loki and Thor before settling on Odin. I mean no ill will, O king, but there are matters I must discuss with you in person. Over the past few days, Noah had been probing the limits of the Space Stone. He discovered he could channel its power through his eyes to peer across space, an ability akin to Heimdall's all-seeing sight. He wasn't as adept or as effortless at it as Heimdall yet, but it let him view distant worlds and pinpoint Asgard's location. He'd amused himself by watching Heimdall's puzzled expressions as the gatekeeper caught glimpses of someone watching him, and it taught him the reach of the stone. When he cast his sight toward Asgard this morning, he sensed Odin's potent aura in the royal palace and quietly slipped into the corridors to eavesdrop on the conversation between father and sons without detection. When he judged the moment opportune, he used the space stone to appear in the hall. Odin's question hung in the air. Noah bowed again, then spoke plainly. King Odin, the Dark Elves do indeed still exist. They will awaken soon. You already know the cause. There is only one thing that will draw them forth. Odin's gaze remained fixed on Noah. A powerful pressure radiated from his aged frame, the presence of a ruler who could still command storms and fate. Noah did not flinch. With 2 Infinity Stones and the Resolve rune in his arsenal, he had little to fear from most adversaries in the universe. The hall throbbed with tense silence as Odin considered Noah's words, the old king's thoughts hidden beneath the measured calm of a monarch preparing for what might come. Chapter 268, A Predetermined Fate? A clash of auras erupted in Asgard's throne hall. Noah, still young, could not match Odin's battle-hardened presence. The The king's power had been tempered by countless wars and the long years of rule. Still, Noah felt no inferiority. He now wielded 2 Infinity Stones and a Resolve rune. That combination backed his confidence. Odin, however, had no intention of turning their meeting into a fight. He was only displeased at Noah's brazen intrusion into Asgard. The tension ebbed as quickly as it had flared, and the hall settled into uneasy quiet. "What you mentioned, could it be the ether particle?" Odin asked. "The ether particle?" Thor and Loki exchanged puzzled looks. The term sounded unfamiliar. "Yes," Noah nodded. "The ether particle has been sealed by Asgard in a place both secure and hidden. Even if the Dark Elves survive, they shouldn't be able to find it." "That should be the case," Odin said in a low voice. "But destiny has other plans. The cosmic anomaly of the 9 realms alignment is approaching. When that happens, the aether particle may break free for reasons beyond us, and then the Dark Elves will know where to find it. A tragedy none of us want will unfold." Noah waved his hand and projected a vast scene into the hall. After many uses, he had grown adept at building such holographic reconstructions. The assembled watched as his projection unfolded, the 9 worlds of the 9 realms, distant and scattered, gradually drawing into a single straight line. Space itself warped. Gravitational and spatial instabilities rippled through realms. Noah zoomed in on a scene on Midgard, Earth. Jane was shown being pulled into an unstable pocket of space. Thor's expression hardened, and Mjolnir hummed with his master's anxiety. "Jane!" Thor burst out, visibly shaken. "No need to panic," Noah said quickly. "This is a possible future. Jane is still on Earth now." Odin gave his son a sidelong glance, reproachful at Thor's reaction to an image of uncertain reality. The projection continued. Jane appeared in a cave where a vertical, rectangular pillar stood, clearly not natural. A crack at the pillar's base glowed red. Jane approached and peered inside, spotting a flowing crimson light. Before she could react, the red substance adhered to her wrist and fused into her. "This is how the ether particle is unsealed," Noah said. He fast-forwarded the vision. The scene snapped forward to Frigga, Miss Freya, a witch by Noah's earlier words, being struck down. "What?" Thor and Loki cried, stunned. Odin, usually composed, showed the first real fracture of concern. "This is a destiny set in motion," Noah said flatly. Odin closed his eyes and considered the vision for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. "What do you propose?" Noah laid out his intent plainly. "The Dark Elves will sense the ether particle's location. If you give me the ether particle, I will deal with them. I can prevent the deaths you've seen. The fates of Jane and Miss Freya can be rewritten." He was candid. He had come for the ether particle, the reality stone. Odin's gaze sharpened. "Why so eager to collect infinity stones?" he asked. "You already have 2. "Because if I don't, someone else will. A madman who'll be far more hostile to Asgard than I am," Noah replied. He flicked his wrist and the projection dissolved into chaos, ready to be replaced. "Enough. We've seen more than enough." Odin dismissed the display with a tired sweep of his hand. "The aether particle's sealing place is hidden by magics and wards. I must consult Asgard's ancient texts to determine its exact location." "Very well. I'll wait on Earth for your news." Noah accepted the postponement with little ceremony. He appeared and vanished in a blink, slipping out of the throne hall. Odin watched the empty space left by his sudden departure, then narrowed his eyes. Noah's control over space, the new space stone, was astonishingly proficient. The boy's talent was undeniable. Once Noah was gone, Loki pressed his case. "Father, you agreed to him? We could retrieve the ether particle ourselves and deal with the Dark Elves." Thor nodded in agreement. He believed Asgard alone should be able to handle the threat. Odin rubbed his forehead and spoke slowly. "Your mother likely understood this was destiny long before we saw it. She must have seen this path as part of fate, unchangeable." "Destiny," Loki scoffed. "Then why is that human so confident he can alter it?" "Because he is powerful enough," Odin answered. "He holds 2 infinity stones and a force I cannot yet name. He thinks he can change what seems written. And I am old. My strength is not what it once was." He went on to explain that his awakening from the Odin sleep had not fully resolved the turmoil inside him. The power that sustained him might relapse. When it did, his end could come. For a moment, the 2 sons fell silent. Then Odin added another grim truth. The twilight of the gods, the end prophesied for Asgard, loomed on their horizon. Meanwhile, Noah returned to Earth just as effortlessly as he had come. He thought the Reality Stone problem should be resolvable if Odin located the ether particle, but he could not predict how long the king and his seers would need. All things considered, he had achieved what he came for by forcing the issue into the open. Now there were other matters to attend to. Noah had used the Space Stone to spy on Odin and his two sons arguing about the Dark Elves. He pushed that advantage further, breaching Asgard's defenses with the Space Stone and teleporting straight into the palace's main hall. He had come intending to get the location of the Reality Stone ahead of schedule. His original plan had been to wait for the Nine Realms alignment and let the unstable portal inadvertently send Jane there, then extract the Reality Stone from her. Seeing Odin in person, however, shifted his thinking. Maybe he could secure the Reality Stone now. He noticed how deeply Asgard believed in fate, their doom prophecy of Ragnarok. Frigga, in particular, had accepted the future. When Thor from a parallel future tried to warn her, she stopped him. As a witch, she had seen what would come and refused to alter it. That explained why she hadn't told Odin, who was already dying and powerless to change much. Noah hoped he could use those future scenes as leverage. If he promised to change their destined outcomes, Odin might hand over information about the ether's location. Noah also remembered that, after Thor defeated Malekith, Asgard didn't keep the ether but gave it to the Collector in the realm of nothing. Better it be given to him, Noah thought. He hadn't come to this world merely for spoils. He wanted to change the future. He understood why Odin and the others felt fate was immutable. This universe had the idea of a sacred timeline, a single predetermined script for parallel worlds. That, in turn, called to mind the Time Variance Authority. Noah had long wondered why the TVA hadn't intervened despite all the changes he'd made to events. Maybe this universe lay outside their jurisdiction, or some power, perhaps the system, shielded him from their notice. The system didn't answer when he asked, so speculation was pointless. He'd look for answers when he visited other parallel worlds. When Odin said he needed to look up where the ether was sealed, Noah took it as agreement. He left Asgard quickly. He'd already taken 2 treasures from the realm in a short span and felt awkward about overstaying his welcome. Having accepted so many favors, he didn't want to leave empty-handed. He planned to repay them. He decided to help Odin live longer. If Frigga could be kept from dying, neither of them would have to end up alone in Valhalla. Noah intended to use the Resolve rune to extend Odin's lifespan, but that required a condition. Odin would have to relinquish his divine power. No amount of extended lifespan would matter if his divinity acted up and cut it short. If Odin agreed, Noah would arrange for him and Frigga to retire to Earth and deepen their relationship with their daughter-in-law, Jane. Thor would be happy to see his parents settle down. Back on Earth, Noah resumed work outside the manor for the first time in days. He had been secretly refitting a spaceship in the manor's workshop. By the second day, the enormous modification bay was finished. He even removed the Morning Star from his backpack and set it aside. The hangar still had room for more facilities after parking the ship. With his mission counter refreshed, Noah accepted another Void mission, Pest, to eliminate the remaining Void creatures. It was a variable difficulty assignment with a minimum rating of B. It might escalate to A or higher, depending on how those creatures evolved. If local forces eradicated them first, the mission could vanish. But recall of the Void creatures' tenacity made him think they wouldn't be that easily handled. He flew over New York, looking down on a city that had been attacked days earlier, but was already returning to life. He kept himself hidden with magic, so nobody on the ground would notice a figure hovering above. Collapsed buildings were being repaired and construction crews worked the old battlefield. He saw Maria Stark Foundation logos on many sites, a smart move to raise the foundation's profile and attract donations. The name alone, linked to Tony Stark, gave it weight. The most striking landmark caught his eye, Stark Tower, now properly called Avengers Tower, its rooftop sign displaying the familiar emblem. Tony's renovated Stark Tower had a new logo on the top floor's exterior, the Avengers abbreviation, which looked oddly familiar to Noah. Tony represented the cutting edge of technology. But renovating the tower wasn't something that could be finished in 2 or 3 days. He'd prioritized repairing the glass curtain wall on the outside so the building looked intact, but many internal facilities hadn't yet been replaced. Noah could see straight into the tower. He even spotted Tony and Pepper drinking and chatting on the top floor, but he wasn't here to find Tony, so after a quick glance, he looked away. Below Stark Tower, a crowd had gathered, taking photos with their phones as if they'd found something priceless. Other construction sites around the city had similar clusters of onlookers. If the crews hadn't roped off areas with caution tape and stationed guards, Noah suspected some of them would have charged in to steal a closer look. "People really have nothing better to do," he muttered. The Chitauri invasion had clearly brought some unusual things to this world. After a quick scan turned up nothing else of interest, Noah left and flew on. A loud boom rolled across the sky, drawing glances from people below, but they saw only blue sky and white clouds. The sound was the sonic boom from Noah's flight. There hadn't been clouds near his previous position to leave any visible trail. Notably, he wasn't in the Source Project armor this time, just ordinary clothes. He decided to rely less on armor and more on his own body. It wasn't for fame, it was for training. Wearing the armor all the time had slowed his physical progress. If you didn't train, you couldn't build muscle, and Noah wanted his natural strength to grow faster. Lately, he'd rarely needed the armor's attributes in combat anyway. When he'd faced Corvus Glaive, he'd leaned on rune power and the Infinity Stones. The suit had mainly been decoration. Noah streaked across the city at high speed, scanning below, and finally arrived at a familiar neighborhood. Hell's Kitchen, his old newbie quest spawn point. "Feels like I haven't been here in ages," he said with a touch of nostalgia. His first batch of starter capital, Essence, had come from the generous pockets of the thugs who hung out here. To repay them, Noah had given them either a permanent bed, left in a vegetative state, or a chance at reincarnation. With something this big happening, the people here won't be idle, he thought. It's been a while since I cleaned this place up. I should take a proper look. He set his course over Hell's Kitchen and began a careful, no blind spots, 360-degree sweep of the streets. There were far fewer criminals than before. When he had worn the Source Project armor and acted as the swift wind swordsman, Noah had stirred up trouble here and driven off many factions. Some fled New York altogether. The ones who stayed weren't unwilling. They were tied to assets and couldn't just leave, but the presence of swift wind swordsmen had kept them in check for a while. Recently, however, the events of the past few days had given the gangs new confidence, and some of the fear in their hearts had begun to dissipate. During the day, they still tried to keep a low profile, though you could see more tattooed men hanging around the streets. Chitauri items carried a distinctive energy signature compared to earth weapons and firearms, and Noah could sense those traces. He already knew clearly where Chitauri contraband was hidden in Hell's Kitchen. He could have gone in, confiscated or destroyed the stash, or handed the information to Tony. Tony would be interested in that hardware. Noah guessed S-Heald still kept tight control over recovered Chitauri tech, and he wasn't sure how much Tony had been able to obtain since joining the Avengers. Then something caught his eye. In an alley, he saw a man covered in sharp spines use those quills to kill several low-level gang members before stripping them of cash. When it was over, the spines retracted, and the man reverted to an ordinary human appearance. Noah paused. What kind of ability is that? Is there someone like this in the movies? A mutant, maybe? He probed the man with his senses and detected traces of the Mind Stone's energy passing through the fellow. The energy didn't linger, though. The stone itself wasn't present and wasn't directly empowering him now. After a more thorough scan, Noah understood. This man was a mutant whose power had been triggered by the Mind Stone at some point, much like Wanda and Pietro, whose abilities had awakened under the stone's influence in the original events. Where had that trigger come from in this case? Noah didn't know, and the question made him fly toward the alley to get a closer look. Noah drifted down from the sky and landed in the alley. The Hedgehog Man, finished killing a few thugs and still hunched over their bodies, rifling through pockets, didn't notice him arrive. His power was laughably bad, a trash-tier X-Men knockoff of Spikes and Bravado, but his confidence was Omega level. Noah had nicknamed him Hedgehog Man after seeing the razor-sharp quills sprout from his face and limbs and watching him use them to brutal effect. The corpses were riddled with small bleeding holes. One had been embraced to death, its chest peppered with spikes. Noah watched the killer with a tilted head and keyed Lysandra to scan him. He wasn't wearing his battlesuit, but his belt and earpiece still let him link up. From the center of the transformation belt, a thin beam lanced out and swept the Hedgehog Man. Korean, male, 27 years old. Name XXX. Multiple records of illegal offenses. Lysandra's voice fed the files through Noah's earpiece. No good at all, Noah said, smiling privately. Now he had options. He'd used soul communication, brainwave link, to have Lysandra scan the man so the killer didn't feel anyone behind him. Noah gave 2 soft coughs. The Hedgehog Man flinched, scrambled off the corpses, and turned. "You brat, you looking for death?" he snarled. Seeing only another Asian man and no backup, he immediately flexed his arrogance. To him, this looked like a lone passerby, an easy mark. He barked, "Drop anything valuable and get out of here," and stalked forward over the bodies, thinking only of grabbing the cash and running. His spikes only worked at close range. They couldn't be fired, so chasing someone down would be a hassle. Killing civilians would draw attention from the police. Better to leave with the gang bodies and blame it on a turf war. The stranger, however, merely waved a hand through the air as if uninterested. That dismissal set the killer off. Blood flushed his eyes. Adrenaline and fury made the pupils turn red. He readied himself 5 meters away and pushed off the ground like a coiled spring, charging for the kill. Spikes had already extended from his knuckles, like a crude Wolverine imitation, only nowhere near as hard as bone claws, let alone adamantium. Noah barely looked up as the man lunged. The attack, though fast to the killer, crawled in Noah's perception. He lifted a hand and closed it around the spike-covered wrist. Crack, crack. Pieces of quill shattered and skittered across the alley. The Hedgehog Man froze, dumbfounded. He couldn't tell when the other man had closed his hand or why the spikes hadn't pierced him. His forward momentum stopped as if slammed into a wall. The sound had come from his own weapons breaking under the grip. "You! Who are you?" he spat, panic stabbing through his bravado. He struggled, but the grip didn't budge. Noah grinned. He'd been watching his mission panel while sizing the man up, hoping a run-in with a newly awakened mutant might trigger something useful. As expected, a task flickered into existence. B-rank mission mutant. While patrolling your territory, you discovered a wild mutant, and remnants of the Mind Stone's power were found within his body. Please capture him and uncover the truth behind the appearance of mutants. Noah clicked accept on the floating panel with a casual flick of his fingers, even as the man strained. "When did you first notice these powers?" he asked, his tone easy. "Why the hell should I tell you? Let go, or I'll kill you," the Hedgehog Man roared, fury surging back through him. He slammed the other hand into action. Spikes burst from knuckles and between fingers and lashed out again, trying to free himself and finish the stranger. Just as Noah asked when the other man's power had awakened, the Hedgehog Man didn't answer. He attacked. Despite having already failed his first strike and having his wrist spikes crushed, the Hedgehog Man didn't seem to notice the imbalance between them. He swung his fist at Noah again. Noah looked on, mildly incredulous. He still held the Hedgehog Man's right wrist. He didn't bother to block. Instead, he squeezed the wrist in his hand until bone cracked. "Ah!" The crack came first, then the scream. Noah let go. The Hedgehog Man's wrist hung lifelessly, the crushed bones making it dangle in his plaintive cries. "Can you answer me now?" Noah asked. The other man continued to scream, seemingly unable to hear. Noah raised an eyebrow, extended his hand, and sent out several threads of invisible magic. The threads latched onto the Hedgehog Man and wrapped him, and Noah wrenched at the spikes on his other hand, one by one. Those spikes had grown out of his flesh. Pulling them off felt like ripping out an entire fingernail at once. Noah started removing more than one methodically until the Hedgehog Man howled and finally gasped, I'll talk!" Under the unbearable pain, the Hedgehog Man surrendered. Noah stopped, crossed his arms, and waited. The man slumped to the ground, gasping to steady his breathing, and at last managed, voice trembling with fear. I discovered this power the night before last. Noah considered the answer. The night before last, that had been after the Battle of New York, when they should still have been at Tony's banquet. He mentally ran through possibilities for where the Mind Stone-derived power in the Hedgehog Man could have come from. Noah himself had not used the Mind Stone's power on Earth after he acquired it, so the energy couldn't have originated with him. The only person who had recently used Mind Stone power on Earth was Corvus Glaive, a few days ago. Possessed by the stone, he had repeatedly churned out its power in their fight and even generated a chaotic energy ring in the air. Suddenly, it clicked. The Hedgehog Man's Mind Stone-like ability was residual energy from that chaotic field Corvus Glaive left behind. That energy had mixed and stuck around. When Noah later swept the world with Resurrection Wind, the wind had broken through the field and carried the stone-fused energy to different places. People with latent mutant genes and the right luck could have had their powers activated by that wave, which is exactly what had happened to the Hedgehog Man. But Noah thought only a tiny fraction would actually awaken. When he'd scanned earlier, he'd only seen this one using his ability openly. Others with new powers might be hiding. Also, the chaotic field hadn't been purely Mind Stone energy. It had contained traces of Space Stone power and a heavy presence of Resolve Rune magic. Space Stone, and especially Resolve Rune magic, didn't grant powers to ordinary people. Only those with mutant genes could be affected. This world wasn't going to turn into an X-Men-style place with mutants everywhere. He also wondered about Wanda and Quicksilver. In the original timeline, the Mind Stone had triggered their awakenings at the Hydra base. But in this version, Noah himself had gotten the Mind Stone instead of Hydra intercepting it. That meant Hydra's base wouldn't have the same energy to trigger them, so he couldn't be sure whether they'd awaken here. A soft system prompt popped into Noah's mind. Mission complete. Huh? That's it? I don't have to do anything else? Noah was mildly surprised. He hadn't done much in this assignment. Taught the Hedgehog Man a lesson, made a few deductions, and the mission closed. The system confirmed. B-rank mission, mutant, completed. Obtained 500 essence. 500 essence, the minimum for a B-rank reward, but fair for the difficulty. Noah checked his backpack. After 3 previous 10 pulls, he had 2,800 essence left. With an extra 500, he was now halfway to another 10 pull. Very well. Next is you. Noah shut the system panel and turned back to the Hedgehog Man. The man shuddered at the sound of his voice. Noah tapped his chin, considering what to do, but the Hedgehog Man kept making noise, interrupting his thoughts. Noah waved a hand and knocked him unconscious. Let's see if I can strip the power from him, Noah muttered. Mutant abilities originated from special genes, the so-called X gene in the X-Men world. In this world, only a small portion of people carried that gene. If he wanted to remove the Hedgehog Man's power, Noah would have to target that gene. Noah remembered that in the X-Men comics, there had been a child whose power could nullify other mutants' abilities, his own mutant power. Any mutant who came within a certain radius of the child lost their powers. Humans in that world even tried to synthesize a serum that could replicate the effect, though they never fully succeeded. There was no such character here, so Noah had to figure out another way to strip a mutant of his powers. After thinking it over, he decided it didn't matter whether the Hedgehog Man's power was erased. He could just kill him outright. What intrigued him more was whether he could extract the mutant ability itself from the opponent's body. The Hedgehog Man's power was low level, but Noah might soon face far stronger mutants. Quicksilver, for example. He didn't even know whether Scarlet Witch's powers came from the Tesseract or from her genes. Mutant powers all originate from the X gene, Noah mused. Maybe that's the place to start. Humanity had made progress with genetics, but not to the point of precise individual gene extraction and modification. Noah, however, had access to mature gene technology. Lyssandra's source code was tied to the Source Project, a parallel future universe. Lysandra had been designed as a security AI for the Source Project company, then awakened and rebelled. Because of that origin, she had access to the company's advanced gene research tech, their signature capability. In the project universe, Source Project Armor derived its power by extracting the genes of ancient heroes and embedding them into armor, granting it those heroes' abilities. If the Source Project could do that, maybe Noah could extract mutant abilities from a mutant's genes and reuse them. If the experiment worked, perhaps his nano-robot army could one day become like the Sentinels in X-Men Days of Future Past. Lysandra, do I need to bring him back to the lab? Noah asked, outlining his plan. The lab had the right equipment. This alley had nothing but a few corpses. You can take any tissue or bodily fluids you need, Lysandra replied. Body parts and fluids? Noah looked down at the unconscious hedgehog man and began gathering material. He sliced a small incision over the man's wrist artery with a thread of magic. Blood that should have flowed in a rush instead drifted slowly through the air like a suspended river. The nanomaterial on his belt reconfigured itself into two small square containers, one for blood, one for tissue. Noah directed the blood into one vessel until he had about 500 milliliters. An adult's total blood volume ran roughly 3,500 to 5,000 milliliters, so he had taken about a tenth of the hedgehog man's blood. For tissue, he eyed the spikes scattered around and decided they counted. If the spikes were extensions of the mutant's body, they might carry the most relevant genetic material. He used magic to manipulate the man's body and make every quill extend one more time, even while he was unconscious. With a series of snapping sounds, each spike broke off under an applied force. Noah gathered those spikes and the ones he'd already pulled out into the second container. That should do it, he said, sealing the two vials and slotting them into his system backpack. The containers only took up one storage slot. Noah turned back to the hedgehog man. The magic that had been wrapped around him flared blue and became a consuming fire, reducing the unconscious mutant to ash. Noah's approach to people like this had grown increasingly direct. He'd always had Lysandra scan suspect records. If she showed someone deserved death, he didn't hesitate. If their crimes didn't merit execution, he was more merciful. He was no conventional hero, no white-cloaked sentinel of law. He was an anti-hero. Heroes upheld moral codes and the rule of law. Anti-heroes enforced their own version of justice. If the law could be bent by powerful connections or lax punishment, let killers walk free, they would only create more victims. Noah believed it was more efficient to end the threat himself. "Don't waste the soul," he murmured, producing the dark seal ring. The hedgehog man's chaotic, drifting soul was sucked into the ring's pull and sealed away. The souls of the gang members the hedgehog man had recently killed, still unrestful and gathered nearby, were pulled in as well. Lysandra's scans had shown these corpses were more of the same, petty operators of violence, not innocent bystanders. The hedgehog man's ashes blew away on the wind. He had gone from newly awakened mutant to nothing, a short and inglorious life. Noah ignored the other bodies scattered in the alley. In Hell's Kitchen, a few extra corpses were normal. The police would have to puzzle out what weapon had perforated them like Swiss cheese. A faint sound reached Noah's ears then, making them twitch. It was familiar, the sharp alien report of a Chitauri rifle being fired. Just as Noah was about to leave, a Chitauri rifle cracked in the distance, followed by the dull concussion of an explosion. He recognized the sound immediately. He'd heard it before. The noise came from nearby. Noah slipped out of the alley and, using his magic, rose into the sky. From above, he watched the source, a gang base, now filled with chaos, as if someone had just stormed it. He focused and peered inside, then raised an eyebrow at what he saw. With a quick teleport, he was through the wall and into the middle of the mayhem. Gunfire and explosions filled the cramped space. On one side were the base's gang members. On the other were several people in black tactical suits, heavily equipped. Noah listened to the curses and commotion and quickly pieced it together. During the recent scramble for Chitauri weapons, this gang had gotten their hands on a Chitauri rifle. Before they could learn to use it, a team came to take it. The gang discovered them, but instead of fleeing, the thieves stood and fought. Although the gang had numbers, firepower, and even an alien gun, their opponents were no amateurs. They were disciplined and well-equipped. Flashbangs, smoke grenades, and other special munitions flew at the gang. A whole crew was suppressed by a handful of trained operatives. The Chitauri rifle hardly got a chance to bark. In the confined interior, they were hit by flashbangs and left stunned, and then the invaders began to work. Fragmentation grenades detonated in close quarters. Shrapnel and blood sent men flying, limbs and gore scattered. The invaders seized the Chitauri rifle amid the carnage. With better marksmanship and superior weapons, wearing heavy body armor, they mopped up the remaining thugs. They sustained little damage beyond bruises. When the fighting died down, the intruders nodded and prepared to leave. They weren't searching for survivors or finishing off everyone. Their mission had been to secure the weapon. The killings were simply a brutal way of punishing those who had stood in their way. Then, sudden applause snapped through the room. The attackers whipped their guns toward the sound, fingers tightening on triggers. Bullets sped out, and then, as if attracted by an invisible magnet, froze in midair before clinking to the floor. Not bad reaction. Who are you guys with, FBI? Noah stepped from the shadows, smiling. He didn't really think they were FBI. Their ruthlessness didn't match S-Shield or typical federal tactics. Still, their methods suggested a certain kind of organization. The gunman hesitated. One of them produced an ID and held it up. PFI, unauthorized personnel, please leave immediately. The card looked like an FBI badge, except the photo was obscured by the man's thumb. You the FBI? Funny coincidence, so am I. Noah pretended to fish something from his pocket, but in fact pulled from his system backpack the thick stack of IDs Coulson had given him. He flipped to an FBI badge, held it forward, and asked, "Which unit are you with, and what are you doing here?" The man who had shown the card fell silent. The others exchanged quick hand signals, clearly setting up a plan. "We are," he started, but before he finished, his teammates had already rolled out several flashbangs, then dived for cover behind cabinets and pillars, ears sealed with tactical headsets. Blinding light and a deafening boom followed. They'd counted on the flashbangs to disorient any superpowered opponent while their goggles and headphones protected them. If the stranger was stunned, they could finish him without risk. But the grenades didn't land where they'd meant them to. For some reason, they shifted forward, detonating square in front of the attackers instead of away from them. Their goggles and ear covers suddenly had tiny gaps. The protection failed. The men were hit full on by light and sound, collapsing blind and deaf, thrashing, disoriented. Noah watched. None of it affected him. He'd used space stone power to alter the position of the grenades and to create tiny openings in their protective gear. Enough light and concussion would get through even with eyes closed. The attackers were down, writhing in the blood of the gang members they'd just killed. The scene made Noah's stomach churn. These weren't ordinary thieves. He suspected Hydra operatives, sent to collect Chitauri arms. To be sure, he reached out with the blue surge of the space stone, and a yellow gem appeared in his hand. Chapter 75, The Power of the Mind Stone. Ugh! The stun grenade's after effects hadn't worn off. Men staggered on the floor, rubbing eyes streaming from the intense light. It wasn't real crying. Their eyes had simply been shocked by the blast. Their neural and sensory systems were scrambled, hearing gone, sense of direction gone. Trained soldiers that they were, they groped blindly for their weapons, but couldn't find them. Even if they did, they couldn't tell the muzzle from a teammate's. Blood and broken limbs scattered across the floor made movement even more difficult. They weren't augmented superhumans, just well-trained men. Hit with a double assault on sight and hearing, they couldn't snap back to normal fast. Noah stood with the Mind Stone he'd just taken from the laboratory, suspended in his palm. He watched them, eyes down, quietly amused at the pathetic scrambling. After about a minute, the group began to come around, but before they could regroup, something else hit them. A psychic current, a twisting of the mind. It burrowed into their brains and contorted their will. The Mind Stone in Noah's hand pulsed, sending out a ring of pale yellow energy. Several soldiers who were trying to rise froze and then fell under its control. They became the stone's most loyal servants, and Noah's. "Take off your masks," Noah ordered. Dazed from the grenade, but now under control, they obeyed. The pupils beneath their masks glowed a pale blue. They pulled the tactical coverings off, 3 white faces and 1 black. All looked to be in their 30s. Noah didn't recognize any of them. "What are your identities, and what were you doing here?" Noah asked, thumbs moving as he sent a few messages to Fury. "We're Hydra," one answered in a flat voice. "We operate hidden inside S-Shield. Our superiors ordered us to retrieve alien weaponry." Even trained nine-headed serpent agents who'd learned some resistance to interrogation were useless under the Mind Stone. The gem made body and mind yield completely to its wielder. Hydra, Noah had expected no less. Their brutal methods made it plain they weren't official S-Shield operatives. Noah told Fury he'd found Hydra cells and to send people to take custody. These men were under Noah's control. He could squeeze whatever they actually knew out of them. Of course, the stone couldn't manufacture facts. The agents could only report what they truly knew. Still, Noah grinned at the possibilities. The Mind Stone opened up a lot of options. He could control Alexander Pierce, the Hydra leader hidden in S-Shield, and force him to reveal names. Or, more drastically, he could control all of S-Shield and have Hydra members expose themselves. For now, Noah preferred the less theatrical route. Mass mind control felt too villainous and would definitely alarm others. If he hit a dead end, he'd consider broader measures. After getting their identities, he didn't press further. Blood had already pooled and spread across the floor. Noah stepped back, flicked a little magic to brush blood and dust from the bar, then sat on the counter. He began to disassemble the Shitori rifle, examining its structure while he waited for Fury's people to arrive. The Hydra agents stood motionless like wooden puppets, awaiting his orders. 10 minutes later, Noah looked up. He sensed someone approaching. The place they'd raided was a converted bar. The table he'd been sitting on was the counter. The front door rattled from outside. Someone was trying to force it, but it was locked from the inside. Noah motioned with a fingertip and a thin strand of magic slid over to the lock, releasing it. At that very instant, a boot slammed into the door and it burst open. The men outside had tried to kick it down, unaware it had already been unlocked. The overdone kick sent the kicker stumbling through the doorway, laughter from behind him. The newcomers were Hawkeye and Black Widow, two of Fury's best. Fury trusted almost no one in S-Shield anymore. Only Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Coulson, so they were sent everywhere. Hawkeye stepped in and straight into a pool of blood. He frowned. His style was usually clean and decisive. One lethal shot, never this messy. The kick had splattered blood up his pant leg, and he looked mildly annoyed. Black Widow followed, pinching her nose with two fingers and scowling as she took in the scene. Their eyes swept the blood-red tableau, then fell on Noah perched on the bar counter. "Noah, where's your suit?" Natasha asked, stepping past Hawkeye with a wry smile. The two agents who walked into the bar immediately noticed Noah sitting at the counter. They wondered why he wasn't wearing his black battle armor. He was almost never seen out of it. "Noah, why aren't you in your armor?" Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, said with a smile. Fury had specifically tasked her with getting close to Noah, even to groom the relationship into something more than professional. But when Natasha had seen the two women at his side, she'd already reported back to Fury that the mission looked impossible. "No need for it right now," Noah said, then tossed a rifle across the bar to them. It clattered into Natasha's hands. She stared at the alien weapon in surprise. "Fury sent you? By the way," Natasha said after a quick inspection, "Fury said you ran into Hydra agents. Where are they? Are any of them alive?" They hadn't seen anyone else inside when they arrived, just Noah and the aftermath. The blood on the floor didn't clear things up. "Come out," Noah said casually. Before either of them could react, 4 fully armed soldiers stepped out from a shadowed corner they hadn't noticed and approached. Natasha and Clint went on instinct. Natasha drew a pistol and leveled it at them. Hawkeye, in less than a second, had an arrow knocked and aimed. These were the Hydra men Noah had mentioned, but they were uninjured. Why were they moving on Noah's command? Could Noah's identity be a problem? The 4 soldiers made no aggressive move. "Don't be so nervous," Noah said. "These men were put under my control last night. They'll obey any order I give. If you don't believe me, watch." Noah had them perform a string of humiliating tricks. Backflips, dancing, doing ball-handling drills between their legs, even exaggerated wrestling moves. "Iron Mountain crushes," he called out, and every command was obeyed to the letter. Natasha and Clint lowered their weapons, stunned. These men weren't merely influenced the way Loki used the Mind Stone. They were perfectly blank slates, responsive only to Noah's voice, like puppets. How did you do that? Hypnosis? A hallucinogen? Clint asked, stepping forward to wave a hand in front of one soldier's face, then touching his cheek. The man didn't react. Noah shrugged. A small trick. They obey me now. Take them. You'll want to interrogate them. Ask whatever you need. They will answer truthfully. Both agents' eyes lit up. If these men would tell the truth to anyone asking, they could extract a lot of valuable intelligence about Hydra's operations and the alien weapons they'd been collecting. We shouldn't waste time, Natasha said. Noah, are you coming with us? While the men remained under his control, it was important to move fast. If the hypnotic hold weakened, Noah might be needed to reassert it. Sure, Noah said. He wanted to find Nick Fury, to discuss Hydra, and to ask Agent Coulson about the two surviving members of his parents' team. If Coulson hadn't identified them yet, Noah intended to have him use the Mind Stone to ask. Natasha clipped the Chitauri rifle to her side, took one last look at the mess on the floor, and pieced together what had happened. Some gang members had gotten hold of a Chitauri weapon, Hydra turned up to seize it, and a brutal fight followed. Hydra collecting alien guns was a detail she made a note of. Fury would want to know. They left the bar. The 4 Hydra agents, still in Noah's thrall, followed behind them. Unnoticed, Noah used the dark seal ring to pull in the souls that had risen from the recently dead bodies. The ring glowed faintly in his hand, though no one saw it. It already held a significant number of spirits. Noah figured that if he collected another 100 ordinary human souls, the ring might reach the strength needed to craft artifacts on the level of the Book of Murder. The 2 agents had no interest in cleaning up the scene. The mission was supposed to be covert, and there was no time. They contacted Agent Coulson to scrub any camera footage that might have captured them. In any case, Hydra had already done what they could to cover their tracks. Everything here would be closed off from the outside world. Noah climbed into a black commercial van with Natasha and Clint. The 4 Hydra soldiers were packed into the rear, unable to speak for themselves. The van idled, circled a few times, then left the city, heading into the wilderness. After a long drive, they arrived at a base hidden in a desolate area. Noah wondered how many resources Fury had diverted from the World Security Council and how many secret facilities the director kept. There were clearly a lot. Even a cunning rabbit had 3 burrows, and Fury's collection of hideouts was more than just a few. So, what are your plans now? Noah leaned back in his chair and studied Nick Fury, whose face was unusually grim. Fury had just received explosive news. The leader of the Hydra cell, hidden inside S-Yield, turned out to be someone he never would have suspected, his old superior, Alexander Pierce. Earlier, after Noah, Black Widow, and Hawkeye arrived at the secret base, Noah had brought several controlled Hydra operatives in with the 2 agents, and they quickly met Fury. Fury's hand had nearly gone to his gun when he first saw the 4 entrained agents. Black Widow explained their condition, and when Fury learned the extent of Noah's control over them, his appraisal of Noah shifted again. He didn't say much aloud. Noah's danger rating had just risen in his mind, but he also didn't harbor any immediate hostility. If Fury ever decided to move against Noah, he would first have to be certain his side could win. Noah had the captured operatives stripped of their gear and accompanied Fury into the interrogation room so he could listen. Fury reviewed their files. All 4 were active S-Shield agents with recent external mission reports, veterans with over 10 years of service. He had not expected them to be Hydra. If Fury had interrogated them on his own, they would have resisted. Under Noah's command, however, they answered everything truthfully. That testimony corroborated a thread Fury had been following. He had already placed several Skrull operatives who obeyed him into Hydra ranks to gather intelligence. The Skrulls had been feeding back useful data for days, and Fury had been piecing together how deep Hydra's infiltration ran. The results were worse than he wanted to believe. His estimates suggested that as many as half the agents within S-Shield could be Hydra. The thought that the organization he'd built might be half corroded was intolerable. Fury had spent much of his life forging S-Shield. He wasn't about to let it crumble. His immediate objective was simple and brutally difficult: identify which agents were loyal and which were enemy. With the scrolls quietly in place, he believed it was a winnable problem, so long as he didn't alert the enemy and blow his advantage. He was already planning to insert more scrolls when a message from Noah arrived. Noah had captured several Hydra agents in the city. Fury sent Black Widow and Hawkeye to check. Listening to the interrogation now, Fury realized anew how potent Noah's hypnotic command was. The four operatives moved and spoke entirely as Noah instructed, without a flicker of self-driven resistance. Even more important, they revealed that they had come into contact with the Hydra leader inside S-Healed and knew his identity. At first, Fury felt a surge of hope. Then the name they gave him knocked the hope out of his chest. Alexander Pierce. Pierce was Fury's old superior, mentor, friend, and the man who had helped him rise to the directorship. Fury's expression shifted from excitement to shock. The most obvious person is often the last one you suspect, he thought. Pierce's closeness to him would make it easy for Hydra to hide in plain sight. Fury sat in heavy silence for a moment, weighing the implications. Then an idea struck him. He looked at Noah. Noah, can you use your ability on Alexander Pierce? Despite his reluctance about Noah's power, Fury couldn't deny its tactical value. If Noah could control Pierce, they might extract the identities of Hydra operatives embedded across S-Shield. Confronting Pierce directly would be nearly impossible. Accusing a high-ranking, well-respected official without ironclad proof would be career and organization ending. With Noah's help, Fury could get the evidence he needed without tipping his hand. Noah met Fury's gaze. Of course. Do you want me to control Alexander Pierce? Yes, Fury said, folding his hands under his chin. He's the leader of this cell. He knows a lot. If we can get him to talk, we can map out Hydra inside S-Shield. Fury's voice carried a note of uneasy admiration. The capabilities Noah displayed could solve problems Fury had been grappling with for years. At the same time, he felt a prickle of caution. Noah had the power to slip into the private life of any leader and bend them to his will. That potential both solved and complicated Fury's calculus. Noah nodded. He wanted the same thing, to root Hydra out of S-Shield first, then tackle its branches worldwide. The operatives inside S-Shield were only one branch of Hydra. Other cells across the globe answered to different leaders. But for Noah, the S-Shield cell was the place to begin. They had a plan. Now they just had to reach Alexander Pierce without alarming him first, and then make him tell the truth. Chapter 278. Is revenge about to be taken? By the way, is Coulson here? I need to talk to him, Noah asked. He had already asked Coulson to look into the identities of those two agents. If they turned out to be Hydra, it would confirm that his parents had been killed because of Hydra, and his vendetta would only grow louder. Coulson? He's not here. He's on other assignments with S-Shield, Director Fury replied. He already knew what Noah wanted. Coulson had told him. I'll call him then. Noah's voice was casual, but Fury's eye twitched. Noah had not dialed normally. He had Lysandra hack into Coulson's phone the way she just hacked Fury's. On Coulson's end, the phone was in the middle of a conversation. The vibration had pulled him out of the crowded area and into a corner. When he tried to answer, the screen showed the call was already active. Noah? Do you need something? Coulson asked when the name lit the screen. Noah's calm voice came through. Coulson, how far along are you in investigating those two agents? One moment. Coulson glanced around, then moved to a quieter spot where he wouldn't be overheard. I've looked into them. Something's off, but I can't definitively say they're Hydra. He chose his words carefully, even in a seemingly safe place. This was sensitive. He didn't want his findings intercepted. Still can't tell? Noah's frown was audible. He thought it over. Coulson didn't have any supernatural way to extract the truth, and Fury probably hadn't disclosed the scroll operation to him. It made sense. Noah was about to ask for their current location so he could confront them when Fury, standing beside him, spoke first. Those two are Hydra, Fury said flatly. I've confirmed it through certain means. Coulson? Noah, are you with the director? Coulson sounded surprised. Fury's voice answered, and then stunned him with the revelation. Is that true, Director? Coulson asked. Absolutely, Fury replied, but I can't reveal my methods. Of course, the scrolls. Disguised as nine-headed serpent agents, they'd fed Fury critical intelligence, including the identities of the two people Coulson had been chasing. Coulson's voice went quiet, threaded with regret. If that's true, I owe you an apology, Noah. If I had known earlier, your parents and my teammates. No, Coulson, it's not your fault. Noah closed his eyes, breathed, and steadied himself. Tell me where they are now, and I'll go find them. Coulson pulled up the mission details. They're in New Mexico, on a bureau mission to search for alien weapons taken from New York. The reported location is at. He read off coordinates and then added, given their identities, the report could be doctored, but I'm certain they're somewhere in New Mexico. Send me their mission file, Noah said. A file transfer pinged almost immediately. Try not to alert them, Fury warned. Nearly half of the bureau was compromised by Hydra. If Hydra realized the shield knew before they could root out traitors, things would get dangerous fast. No need to worry. Noah's answer was cool. Those two will quietly disappear from this world. If you're worried about tipping them off, why not let your aliens handle it? Then hand me those 4. He nodded toward the 4 Hydra operatives under his temporary control. They'd be perfect for your scrolls to mimic. Fury watched Noah leave and allowed himself a small nod. Noah's ability to transfer control was uncanny. Still, he was cautious. He ordered the 4 controlled operatives to line up. The men obeyed without hesitation, and then had them restrained with handcuffs and leg shackles. If the control wore off unexpectedly, Fury didn't want them to be free in the middle of an operation. He called Talus, his Skrull team leader. Send 6, Fury instructed. These 4 for now, and be ready for more. I don't expect both of the targets Noah is after to survive. Prepare for contingencies. Outside the secret base, Noah tapped his phone and said, Lysandra, find those 2 and tell me where they are now. On it, Lysandra replied, and immediately began scanning nearby satellites. She hacked the nearest feed, then slid into any accessible cameras, traffic cams, mobile phones, laptops, anything connected to the internet in the area of the coordinates Coulson had sent. Found them, Noah, she reported quickly. They're not in the city, out in the countryside. Ideal for what we need. Noah stared at the location for a moment, then stepped into a teleportation portal that opened before him. Noah stood on a low rise, arms folded, watching the black SUV pick its way along the mountain track below. It was a heavy-duty vehicle, high clearance, a powerful engine, meant to chew through rough terrain without complaint. That wasn't what held his attention, though. 2 of the occupants were Hydra agents, tied to the deaths of his parents. And there were more people inside than Coulson's briefing had indicated. S-Healed. Files listed only 2 agents assigned to this location. The extra bodies could be only one thing. More Hydra operatives, here for the same prize. He'd already seen Hydra moves against Chitauri weapons twice today. Their interest in the alien tech was obsessive. The SUV slid into a small stand of trees and vanished. That meant nothing to Noah. He lowered himself into a crouch, slammed his heel into the dirt, and opened a crater with a single, concentrated push of force. He charged the grove, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris as he went. The sudden commotion rattled birds from the branches and sat like a bomb in the men's ears. The SUV braked hard on the narrow track, leaving twin skid marks in the loose soil. The occupants froze and listened. They were careful people by profession, Hydra men who didn't want identities exposed, and a noise like that demanded caution. Before any of them could climb out to investigate, something landed directly in front of the vehicle with a concussion. Dust billowed. For a moment they could see nothing and guessed wildly, meteorite, explosive, but the form that emerged only added to the confusion. The dust rose and spun, coalescing into a twisting column that flung grit so hard it pitted and gouged the trunks of trees. The men ducked instinctively behind the SUV's armored body. Then the dust thinned, and a figure stepped forward. Rifles rose sighting on him, and he vanished. Metal screamed. The left rear door was ripped open, as if peeled back by a giant hand. The sound of tearing steel haloed the grove. Whatever had done it could have been a bear, if bears tore through alloys like paper. When the men looked, the person who had opened the door stood there, calm. The driver reacted before he thought. He grabbed his rifle and emptied a burst. The muzzle spat at point-blank range, tracer lines stuttering into the figure. The bullets hit and flattened as if striking hardened alloy, folding uselessly and dropping to the floor. They did no harm. Noah had his resolve rune active, and he wore the vibranium weave Gwen had sewn into his jacket. Bullets glanced off them like rain off a roof. He crushed the rifle in the driver's hands with one motion, wrenched the man free, and hauled him out by the throat. The others fired anyway, hoping sheer volume would find a seam, but the gunfire was ineffectual. Noah shook grit from his hair, flicked a few battered bullet tips from his jacket, and threw the driver like garbage into a nearby tree. The trunk cracked where the man's body struck it. The force of the impact left the man crumpled and bleeding on the ground, his eyes glazing. In the back seat, the two Hydra agents were panicking. They had been reloading madly, magazines emptied, terrified and scrambling for the doors. The passenger had smashed a hole in the lock with a few shots and yanked his door open, making for the underbrush, but Noah was already there. He planted his palm on the SUV's roof. His magic panged over the metal like a living skin. With a single, effortless heave, the roof peeled away. It flipped and came down like a lid, crushing the escaping man beneath it. Blood smeared the edge of the torn metal. Noah looked into the faces of the two left in the back seat, wide-eyed, breathing hard. He had come for them. "Next," he said quietly, "Chapter 280, Revenge." "Now it's your turn," Noah said, looking at the two Hydra operatives in the back seat. They wore black combat suits but no helmets or masks, so their faces were exposed. Both were white, blonde, and looked close to 40. Noah remembered from the files. One was 39, the other 41. If his parents had lived, they would be about that age now. The thought sent a hard glint into his eyes. "You, who are you?" one of the agents demanded, voice shaking. "We're S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, working for the U.S. government," the other blurted. "What you're doing goes against everything." Noah sneered when he heard the name. "S.H.I.E.L.D.? He cut them off. "I don't care about your labels. Do you remember Li Lei and Lin Han?" They exchanged a glance. Of course they remembered. These were people who had worked shoulder to shoulder with Noah's parents for nearly a decade. They had betrayed them on orders from within Hydra. Seeing Noah ask the question, one of the men hesitated. "Don't you remember? The ones you betrayed," Noah said, his voice rising. He spread his hands, and a telekinetic suction drew the two men up into his grasp. His fingers closed around their throats. They choked and clawed at his hands. A yellow stone hovered at Noah's side, pulsing with energy, the Mind Stone he'd taken from the lab and kept on him. He tightened his grip until they started to gag, then eased it just enough to let them speak. Under the stone's influence, they had no choice. "We, S.H.I.E.L.D. gave our team a mission," one of them stammered. "At the time, Captain Coulson was out on another assignment. We went in as the team." They told the story in a rush. The team had been sent to investigate a mysterious base. At first, the two men intended no betrayal, but then Hydra operatives fed them secret orders. The base was Hydra's, and Hydra wanted that team eliminated. Their assignment was to assist Hydra agents in taking out their own team and to buy time for Hydra to secure the installation. They followed the orders to the letter, then staged themselves as survivors and passed the Bureau's interrogation. Noah's parents and the rest of the team had been listed as casualties. Noah closed his eyes. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. His muscles twitched as if he wanted to crush them on the spot. But he held back. He didn't want them to die easily. He threw them out of the SUV and then, as if to vent, kicked the vehicle. The 3-ton steel beast flipped and flew several meters, slamming through a stand of trees. The two operatives lay on the ground, groaning. They came to more from pain than from the blow. The Mind Stone's control had been released. When he'd had them under the stone's influence, they couldn't feel pain. Now, awake and aware, they reeled. A blue stone appeared in Noah's hand. Space power hummed through him. Behind the two men, the air itself began to shiver. Two unstable spatial vortices formed at their heels and latched onto them. The vortices took their legs first, grinding like whirling voids, tearing through flesh and bone. The men screamed, dragging themselves forward in blind, instinctive flight, even as the black holes chewed upward. Blood and tissue were swept into the rifts and absorbed. They clawed at the ground until their fingers bled, but the agony behind them was far worse. Ankles and calves vanished. The vortices grew as they fed on the bodies, ravenous and inexorable. They began to lose control of themselves. Their screams turned ragged, edged with shock. Noah snapped his fingers, and a pulse of green energy halted them mid-struggle, freezing their bodies while leaving their minds painfully lucid. He wanted them to feel every second of the approach to death. Their lower bodies were consumed, knee after knee disappearing, until only howls filled the clearing. Noah's patience thinned. With a casual motion, he strengthened the spatial pull. The vortices widened and drew the rest of them in, sucking up the two men's half-bodies along with dirt and spent vegetation. When the last of them vanished into the hungry folds of space, the rift snapped shut. Noah closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Satisfaction, cold and final, washed over him, then a wave of melancholy he could not deny. He opened a teleport and was gone. He had places to return to now, and two people he wanted to bring with him, Lysandra and Gwen.